40 minutes before my sister was supposed to walk down the aisle, my water broke inside the bridal suite. At 8 months pregnant, I was terrified and desperately pleading with someone to call an ambulance. Instead of helping me, my mother snatched my phone out of my hands, pushed me into a small storage room, locked the door from the outside, and coldly said, "You can wait until the ceremony is over. You're not going to ruin your sister's wedding." I screamed, pounded on the door, and cried for help until my voice gave out. After that, everything faded into darkness. Hours later, I opened my eyes in a hospital bed. Police officers stood nearby. My husband was crying beside me, and my mother sat in the corner begging me not to tell anyone what she had done. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, happily married to the most caring man I've ever known, and expecting our first child. Just a week before my sister's wedding, if someone had asked whether I trusted my family, I would have answered without a second thought. Looking back now, I couldn't have been more mistaken. Growing up, my younger sister, Olivia, was always the focus of our mother's world. Olivia wasn't selfish or cruel. We actually shared a close bond for most of our lives. The problem wasn't her. It was our mother, who treated every one of Olivia's milestones as though the entire world should stop to celebrate. Whether it was birthdays, graduations, promotions, or even the smallest achievements, everything revolved around Olivia. I learned at a young age that staying quiet and avoiding conflict was much easier than fighting for attention I was never going to receive. By the time Olivia got engaged, my mother had completely devoted herself to planning the perfect wedding. Every conversation centered on flowers, seating charts, dress fittings, decorations, or making sure every tiny detail was flawless. My pregnancy barely came up unless another family member mentioned it first. My doctor had already warned Daniel and me that there was a strong chance our baby would arrive early. "Don't ignore any unusual pain," she reminded us, "and keep your hospital bag with you wherever you go." We took her advice seriously. Even on the morning of the wedding, our overnight bag was packed and sitting in the trunk of our car just in case we needed to rush to the hospital. Daniel suggested we skip the wedding altogether. "Your health and the baby come first," he said more than once. But my mother insisted there was nothing to worry about. "It's only a few hours," she assured us. "Your sister wants you there." Despite Daniel's concerns, and despite the uneasy feeling I couldn't shake, we drove to the beautiful countryside venue, smiled for family photos, and admired the elegant decorations while pretending everything was normal. I kept telling myself that I only had to make it through the ceremony. Then, while adjusting my dress outside the bridal suite, a sharp pain suddenly tightened across my stomach. I froze in place. A few seconds later, another wave hit, stronger than the first. The second contraction was so intense that I reached for the wall to keep myself from falling. One of Olivia's bridesmaids immediately noticed the expression on my face. "Emily, are you okay?" she asked with concern. Before I could answer, another contraction stole my breath. I struggled to speak. I think I'm in labor." The room instantly fell silent. Someone quietly said, "Call an ambulance." Before anyone had the chance to grab a phone, my mother appeared in the doorway. "What's going on here?" she demanded. I looked at her, trying to remain calm despite the pain. "Mom, I need to get to the hospital. My contractions are only a few minutes apart." For one brief moment, I expected fear or concern to cross her face. Instead, her expression became cold and unyielding. "No." I stared at her in disbelief. "What?" "You are not leaving 40 minutes before your sister's wedding." For a second, I honestly thought she had misunderstood what I had just said. "Mom, this isn't something I can postpone," I pleaded, struggling to stay on my feet. "The baby is coming." She leaned closer and lowered her voice so no one else could hear. "People have spent months preparing for today," she whispered sharply. "You can wait a little longer." Another contraction doubled me over, stealing my breath. "I can't." I reached into my purse, desperate to call Daniel. "I need to call my husband." The instant my fingers wrapped around my phone, my mother snatched it away before I could unlock. "Mom, please. I'll give it back after the ceremony," she said without hesitation. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," she snapped, her eyes filled with irritation instead of concern. "You are not going to ruin Olivia's wedding because of terrible timing." The bridesmaids looked at one another in stunned silence, too shocked to step in. Tears blurred my vision. "I'm scared," I whispered, hoping those words would finally break through her stubbornness. For just a second, I believed she might soften. Instead, she grabbed my wrist with surprising force. "Come with me." She led me down a quiet hallway, far away from the guests and the bridal party. Every step triggered another painful contraction that shot through my body. "Mom, please," I begged again, barely able to walk. She ignored every word I said. She stopped in front of an unmarked door, turned the handle, and pushed me inside. Before I could even ask what she was doing, the door slammed shut behind me. A second later, I heard the unmistakable click of a key turning in the lock. For several seconds, I simply stood there staring at the closed door, convinced this had to be some horrible misunderstanding. I grabbed the handle and twisted it with all my strength, but it wouldn't budge. "Mom!" I shouted, pounding on the door. "Open it!" Her voice came calmly from the other side, and the coldness in it made my stomach tighten. "The ceremony will be over in 40 minutes. Just stay quiet." I slammed my fist against the door again. "I'm in labor." "I know." Those 2 words frightened me more than anything else. She knew exactly what was happening, and she had still chosen to lock me inside. Another contraction crashed through my body so violently that I collapsed onto my knee. Out of instinct, I reached into my pocket for my phone, only to remember she had already taken it away. Nothing. No phone. No way to call Daniel. No way to call for help. The room was barely larger than a storage closet. Metal shelves lined the walls, packed with folded tablecloths, cleaning supplies, extra decorations, and boxes of candles waiting to be used at the reception. There were no windows, no second exit, only the locked door standing between me and the outside world. I screamed until my throat felt raw. I pounded on the shelves, hoping the crashing metal would be loud enough for someone to hear. Instead, faint wedding music echoed through the walls. The ceremony had already begun. While the guests smiled, applauded, and watched my sister walk down the aisle, I remained trapped in a locked room, completely alone. Time lost all meaning. 1 minute blended into the next as the contractions became closer together and far more intense. I tried focusing on my breathing, just like I had learned during childbirth classes, but the pain overwhelmed every technique I knew. Sweat soaked through my dress, and my hands shook so violently that I struggled to lift myself off the floor. "Please," I whispered into the empty room. "Someone help me." Outside, the music grew louder, followed by the distant sound of applause. Then my vision slowly began to fade. The shelves blurred together, the floor seemed to disappear beneath me, and the light overhead became dimmer with every passing second. My eyelids felt impossibly heavy, and the last thing I remembered before losing consciousness was... The last sound I remembered before everything went dark was the cheering from the wedding reception. Then the voices disappeared, and the darkness swallowed me completely. When I finally regained consciousness, the first thing I heard was the steady rhythm of a heart monitor. A bright light shone above me as I struggled to open my eyes. My eyelids felt incredibly heavy, but I forced them open anyway. The ceiling above me wasn't the wedding venue anymore. It was a hospital room. I slowly turned my head and saw Daniel sitting beside my bed. His suit was wrinkled, his tie was missing, and his bloodshot eyes told me he had spent hours crying and worrying. The moment he realized I was awake, he rushed forward and took my hand in both of his. "Emily!" he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "I thought I was going to lose you." I tried to speak, but my throat was painfully dry. Only one question mattered. "The baby." A tired but genuine smile spread across his face. "Our little girl is safe." The words hit me like a wave of relief. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I closed my eyes for a moment, silently thanking. Daniel gently squeezed my hand. "She needed extra monitoring after the emergency delivery," he explained softly. "But the doctors are confident she's going to be okay." For the first time since waking up, I felt like I could finally breathe. Then another question rushed into my mind. How did they find me?" Daniel's expression immediately turned serious. "When you stopped answering your phone, I knew something wasn't right. I searched the entire venue looking for you. Your mother kept telling everyone that you had gone home because you weren't feeling well." He paused, still struggling to process everything that had happened. But that story didn't make sense. I checked the parking lot. Our car was still there, and our hospital bag was exactly where we left it in the trunk. There was no chance you would leave without telling me. After the ceremony ended, one of the catering employees was cleaning up when they heard faint banging coming from a storage room. Curious, they unlocked the door. "They found you unconscious on the floor," Daniel said quietly. The employee called an ambulance immediately. He looked away for a moment before speaking. "There's something else." Several wedding guests had seen my mother leading me into the hallway shortly before the ceremony began. One guest had even recorded part of our argument on their phone, assuming it was just ordinary wedding stress. The video clearly showed my mother taking my phone from my hands before leading me away. A gentle knock interrupted our conversation. A detective stepped into the room carrying a small notebook. After introducing himself, he pulled a chair beside my bed and spoke in a calm, professional tone. "Mrs. Carter," he said, looking directly at me, "did anyone deliberately prevent you from receiving medical assistance that afternoon?" I didn't hesitate for even a second. "Yes. My mother knew I was in labor. She took my phone, locked me inside a storage room, and left me there while the wedding continued." The detective carefully wrote down every word without interrupting me. When I finished telling him everything, he simply nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Carter." By the following morning, the investigation had already gained momentum. Several wedding guests came forward voluntarily to share what they had witnessed. One of Olivia's bridesmaids admitted that she had heard me begging to call Daniel before my mother dragged me into the hallway. Another guest confirmed hearing my mother say, "You can wait until after the ceremony." Then the catering manager gave investigators an even more disturbing statement. According to him, my mother had actually stopped one of the staff members from checking the storage room earlier that afternoon, insisting there was nothing important inside, and that everyone should focus on preparing for the reception instead. Earlier that afternoon, my mother had smiled at one of the venue employees and casually said, "It's just some family belongings. Please don't open that room until after the reception." Believing there was nothing unusual, the employee respected her request. No one could have imagined that a terrified, pregnant woman was trapped inside, desperately waiting for someone to rescue her. Later that evening, Daniel arrived at the hospital carrying a small flash drive. "The venue has security cameras," he said quietly. My heart started racing as he plugged it in. The footage showed my mother leading me down the hallway while I struggled to walk through painful contractions. It clearly captured her taking my phone from my hands before unlocking the storage room. Then it showed her pushing me inside, closing the door, and calmly walking away alone. There were no cameras inside the room, but there didn't need to be. The timeline told the entire story. When my sister Olivia finally came to see me, she looked nothing like the bride from earlier that day. Her makeup had been washed away by tears, and her eyes were swollen from crying. "I didn't know," she whispered the moment she stepped into my room. "Emily, I swear. I had no idea." I believed her. She sat quietly beside my bed for several minutes before asking the one question that broke both of our hearts. "Were all of my wedding photos being taken while you were locked in that room?" I couldn't answer. I didn't have to. The pain on her face told me she already knew the truth. As she stood to leave, she slowly slipped her wedding ring off her finger and placed it on the table beside my bed. "I don't even recognize the family we grew up in anymore," she said softly. Then she turned and walked out, leaving the ring behind. The weeks following my daughter's birth should have been the happiest time of my life. Instead, they became the weeks when every illusion my family had built finally collapsed. Olivia visited me almost every day. One afternoon, she quietly sat beside my hospital bed and said, "I canceled our honeymoon." I looked at her in surprise. "I couldn't celebrate after everything that happened to you." A few days later, she confronted our mother in front of several relatives. "I'll never get another wedding," my mother cried through her tears, trying to justify herself. Olivia looked directly at her. "You almost made Emily's daughter grow up without a mother." The room fell completely silent. For the first time in my life, no one defended our mother. Relatives who had spent years ignoring the obvious finally admitted they had seen the favoritism all along. One by one, they walked away, unwilling to excuse what had happened. Daniel and I made a different choice. We refused to spend our future consumed by anger or endless family arguments. Instead, we focused on bringing our little girl home, surviving sleepless nights, celebrating her first smiles, and discovering the quiet happiness that comes with becoming parents. For the first time in my life, I stopped chasing my mother's approval. I finally understood that family isn't defined by blood alone. My family was no longer the one I had been born into. It was the one Daniel, our daughter, and I were creating together every single day. Just when I believed that painful chapter of my life had finally ended, a handwritten letter arrived in our mailbox. My mother's name was written neatly across the envelope. I opened it only once. Every page was filled with apologies. She admitted she had made a terrible mistake. She wrote that she wished she could erase that day, that she regretted every decision she had made, and that she hoped I might someday find it in my heart to forgive her. When I finished reading, I carefully folded the letter, slipped it back into the envelope, and placed it in a drawer where it has remained ever since. That was the moment I realized something important. Forgiveness doesn't always mean inviting someone back into your life. Sometimes it simply means letting go of the anger while choosing never to reopen the same door that once caused you so much pain. Some wounds heal best from a distance. Today, when I watch my daughter laughing in Daniel's arms, my mind no longer returns to that wedding day. Instead, I think about the life we've built together, a home filled with love, trust, respect, and the kind of kindness I always wished for as a child. The day my mother locked me inside that storage room, she believed she was protecting one perfect moment. Instead, she lost something far more precious. And in the middle of my darkest day, I finally found the peace, the family, and the life I had deserved all along.